Hey everybody, it's tafony here once again. Hope you're doing well. Today's another one of those weird rambling about episodes where I'm talking not about a piece of gear, but about rehearsal spaces. Specifically lockout rehearsal spaces, and mostly just wanting to share the crazy stories from the places the bands I was in rented from over the years. So I have pretty mixed feelings about content warnings, but I really feel just generally in this video I should mention that it's not going to be necessarily like talking about getting the right price or finding the best location or stuff like that. We're going to touch on addiction and death and whatever else I'm neglecting to remember right now. So if you're maybe putting this on as sort of a light thing to listen to in the background, maybe don't play it on speakers or something if you're at work or whatever. So you're in a band. You're an adult now, but you live in the most expensive city in North America, so naturally you and all of your bandmates are in condos or basement suites. You no longer have access to your parents' garage anymore. So I guess if you want to be in this band, you're going to have to find somewhere to play. There are hourly rehearsal spaces. These are often a lot better quality and straightforward to drop into. You just book them whenever everyone is available, basically, if the space is available, but they're often more expensive, and more importantly, if you have equipment for playing live, that means you would have to store it somewhere. And since you're paying an arm and a leg for 400 square feet at home, then you probably aren't going to want to store an 8x10 Ampeg fridge in the main room for long before your significant other gets pissed off. So enter lockout spaces, often cheaper and more flexible than renting a couple hours each week from an hourly rehearsal studio. You get a set of keys and a room that's usually shared with a couple other bands they will be fighting in the group chat with. Because the head tenant has to beg sometimes up to 5 different bands for money at the end of each month, or your bandmates leave their beer and empties all over their equipment, or that one roommate who has weed for breakfast at 35 left the space completely unlocked and walked off at the end of practice, or grown adults using their roommate's equipment without asking. And I'm going to say, while that all sounds excellent on paper where I am in Vancouver, and at that time, which was the end of 2019 into the summer of 2025, I might recommend hourly spaces. Like I said, having somewhere to store all your stuff is the best part about them, but with these 3 stories I'm going to share today, would probably worth it to just figure out, I don't know, a storage locker or something. If nothing else, cherish the times when you practice in your buddy's parents' basement, or someone's work who let you use their warehouse after hours. That stuff is worth its weight in gold. Okay, so I'm going to share stories from 3 of the 4 spaces we rented from. This was the first place we rented from just before the pandemic in 2019 for about 2 years. This was in the Vancouver suburb where I grew up. The place was decent. It was all metal bands. Like, we were the only post-punk sort of alt-rock thing, I guess, in a sea of long hairs. And this is pretty consistent of all the different spaces, but it was extra hilarious at this one where you just have this loudness war with all your roommates, or all your neighbors, I should say, where the walls would be shaking, you wouldn't be able to hear yourself, and everybody would just be turning up louder and louder and louder. And consistent for all of them as well. It was insane to think of like this makeshift warehouse converted into 50 different rooms, right, with all the exposed drywall. And I always wonder how much oxygen is in these rooms at the end of practice, right? You have a room double barricaded with 0 ventilation and 3 sweaty dudes, but it was perfect for our needs at that time. This place was nicely priced and it worked well. We moved into a different room after COVID because, you know, no bands were playing and they were all dropping out of the rehearsal spaces. Just as a random bit of Vancouver trivia, if you know the band Ninja Spy, they were renting from the same room that we moved into on the second half. Anyway, a little random dorky bit, and it won't be the last. Anyway, so as COVID went on, the landlord became more and more erratic and eventually started asking us for rent early. It was always something used he really wanted to buy off Craigslist came up at like 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Like, he wanted to buy a PA or some microphone or some gear that he really wanted, but he would offer us discounts to pay early all the time. And we always did it when he asked and offered. I felt, and I still kind of feel a little guilty about doing it, well, knowing full well where it was probably being spent, but also as a tenant, like, I don't want to piss the landlord off either, and, you know, we all needed money to save, right? Anyway, one time we were in there rehearsing, and there's like common areas, right? You have your front door key and then your individual door key, and there's like in the common area where like the bathroom is and the fridge and the vending machines, etc. We kept drinks and water bottles, ice packs for our portable air conditioner in the fridge and freezer every rehearsal, you know, while we were there for like 2+ years. And I went into the fridge to grab something, and there was just some random guy in the common area I didn't recognize, and he was like livid at me for, quote, going in his fridge, and he was like fuming mad. Am I gonna get like beat up by this random stranger? Anyway, apparently he was telling me like the landlord like sublet the common area, including the bathroom, out to like this guy who wasn't even a musician. So I don't know, I just, whenever he was in there in the random common area, you knew to just like, I don't know, tea in a bush outside or whatever. It was crazy. A couple months later, I got a message randomly one day from a neighbor in the space saying basically, hey, stuff was going down at the space. The locks on the front door had been changed, trapping everyone's gear inside, all of our stuff, all the other bands, the entire unit. So I ran over to the space, and I was supposed to go camping this day. I remember I had all my gear full of camping shit and pulling up to the space, and there's probably 20 metalheads all lined up outside the space, maybe more. Anyway, apparently the guy who I thought was the landlord who owned the building had stopped paying rent to the actual landlord who owned the building. And I'll note here, subletting isn't unique to this space. This is the setup of all those spaces. Somebody owns a building. It's usually industrial, formerly industrial, converted into rehearsal spaces that we're all renting out. But it did come as a shock to me at that time that guy had been there for a decade. I just assumed he owned that building from another time. Anyway, going forward, we're going to refer to the guy who runs the space but doesn't own it, who's subletting it, as the manager, and that will go for all these different spaces. So the manager of this space had gotten so far behind on rent that the actual owner came and changed all the locks on him. Turns out he was also living in his room at this space residentially. That'll be a reoccurring theme here as well. And he tried to get the cops to open the space for him for this reason. He had actually put his home address as the space as well, and called the cops, and they wouldn't let him in either because they won't break into the space for you. There's a whole bunch of different things with residential that they will do, but it's totally different when it comes to commercial. Anyway, so to get access back to the space, basically the runner needed some crazy amount of money to catch up on his rent before they were going to let him in. He had some story about how it was landlord's fault or it was lost in the mail or something, but I wasn't about to loan this guy any money. However, in an incredibly generous, albeit seemingly insane act of generosity, I guess, one of our neighbors loaned this guy thousands of dollars, and basically what he said was look, if I can't get my stuff back, I'm gonna lose all of my gear that's worth more than that, right? Which makes sense, but man, you're never getting that money back, and I doubt he ever did. He knew full well that he was probably never going to see that again. Anyway, so he lent him all this money, and they got access to the space again. So anyway, the day we got the keys back, we had been locked out for a week. People had missed gigs because all of their stuff was inside and they couldn't play. We were once again in a huge lineup of metalheads outside the space, itching to get in and save all our trapped possessions. Anyway, that day I went in and saved my bass and pedal board and ran off, but the next day the manager, the guy who had just been loaned all this money, asked to see me. So I went back to the rehearsal space and I met him in that common area. When I went in, we had to stand in the dark because apparently he had the power cut off as well. Guess he wasn't paying BC Hydro either. Anyway, he basically said that it was all a big misunderstanding, but he wanted to make sure that we were going to carry on renting. Anyway, obviously we weren't planning to, but we didn't get any refund for the time we had lost or anything like that. And he said, yeah, so next month rent's going to go up by, I want to say 50%. So the next day, the drummer and I grabbed our 2 cars and packed up all of our shit, and we left. Turns out Devin Townsend, if you know, huge name in the metal community. Turns out Devin was our neighbor upstairs in this place. Yeah, I thought it was crazy. He was there with a real roadie crew and everything, with a 10-ton truck, loading up and getting all of his equipment out of this clusterfuck too. So yeah, that's Space 1. Okay, so the second place, I can't remember if we actually had our first stint at the place that doesn't have any interesting stories in between or not, but the second place we had been on the wait list for since our original search when we moved into the first. Doesn't really matter, but anyway, we had been on the wait list forever, and then one of my mutual friends posted online that there was an opening there. I guess they don't give a fuck about the wait list. Anyway, when we moved in, we were checking out the space, and it was all, the same as every other place we had looked at. It was totally fine, perfect for our needs at that time. They did offer us a discount when we moved in to paint the room because the previous people had graffitied everything when they left all angry, and obviously should have been a red flag, but again, take what you can get, and that was perfect for what we needed at the time. So I even had to install the doorknob on the place because we weren't able to move in for days and days waiting for it to be installed, and eventually I was like, just give me the doorknob you bought, I'll install it for you. Okay, so when we moved in there, the person I'm going to again refer to as the manager. This is the person who runs the business that sublets it. They don't own the building, they're just running a business that sublets it all out to bands. They mentioned the room being under a gay sex club that you could hear moaning from. I thought this was either just weird homophobia or a dumb joke, but it actually turns out it was indeed under a bathhouse, a sex club, which is in fact legal in Canada, as I learned. If you think about it, it makes sense. They can rent out a venue for sex between consenting adults, but they can't sell you those services. spaces. How do we find all this out? Well, one day one of our roommates went in to discover our room had totally flooded. I'm talking they were like free pouring water out of the outlets in our mixing board after. So what happened? Well, apparently there was a toilet backup in the bathhouse above, and whatever happened, it flooded the entire room below. I don't know how true or specific or what, but either way, it was fucking vile. Luckily, our stuff wasn't destroyed, but my roommate's was. All of that time we had put into moving there, collecting stuff to build the space, painting, all pissed on, probably literally. Anyway, we had this huge rug in that space that took 2 people to carry up the stairs. We brought it in to dampen the concrete floor in that rehearsal space. It was all covered in Lord knows what kind of liquid had passed through the walls and the ceiling onto it. And our one roommate was so pissed off that he cut up the wet rug and dumped it all into the entrance of the sex club above. So that's all fucking disgusting, but the manager then told us that the room was quote-unquote condemned and we needed to move into a smaller room with more bands and less time. And the kicker? Well, he was going to raise the rent to do so. Nothing for our roommate's gear to be replaced, just shit out of luck, and now we want more money. So our band said no thank you and left, and of course I had to fight for our damage deposit back after all that. I guess the check was in the mail or whatever. And after all that, I was still in the group chat for the space with all of our neighbors and the manager. Anyway, that manager had not only immediately had someone in that piss-soaked quote-unquote condemned room, but was then asking everyone to make sure that the new tenant who would replace us didn't come around because they too were banned from the space. What a joke. Anyway, that's space number 2. Check out the band Piss. They're from Vancouver as well. I really love them. They might be the best live band in the city at this moment. Anyway, check out Piss. I love Piss. Okay, the third story in the final space that we left when we broke up as a band was in Vancouver proper. This place was ground level, which was a blessing because you didn't have to lug stuff up and down the stairs like we did in that other place. But this place was a little bit further and pricier. It was towards a bit of a rougher area, but really all rehearsal spaces are going to be like that, or at least I thought. As time went on, though, things got rougher and rougher. Like I saw somebody die in the loading bay before a show one time when I was picking up my gear, and I remember being on stage after and being like, yeah, you know, like they say you turn purple when you overdose, but I didn't realize it was like actually like full on like grimace skin. It wouldn't be the last time that we saw something like that in the area, but yeah, it's not just like a tint of purple. Your face will full on like go like, I don't know, the blueberry from Willy Wonka or whatever. Anyhow, again, the layers of subletting, like I said, who is the manager and stuff are complicated, and this place didn't have a manager. It had like a caretaker. It wasn't like the person who ran the business. It was like a guy who lived in his room, and all of these places had people living in them, like I said, whether they were tenants or the runners themselves. But this caretaker was like extremely friendly, but the rumors kind of like swirled about what he was actually doing in the room. And eventually, whenever I was going to or from our space, all the people outside would be like, oh, do you know that guy? Can you go get him for me? Is he in there? I need to talk to him, get him, go like I was like, oh my god, just let me get into the rehearsal space. Anyway, as time went on in the space, every surface in the common area started to pile up with junk and small appliances on them. They converted one of the bathrooms into what looked like the recycling bin outside of a thrift store, and one day this guy brought, I don't know, I would say like a 500-pound gun safe into the main entranceway. Not concerning at all. Anyway, our band broke up and we left the space, but it seems like the space itself is probably not far behind now, so anyway, I'm Tafony. Thank you for listening to me yap about these stories. Sometimes I feel like I need to like get them out to convince myself they actually happened. So if you have any experience with rehearsal spaces like this or art studios or whatever have you, share them. Part of what I love about Eurorack and electronic music is you can just make it by yourself in your living room and not have to worry about any managers other than the one up here. So I'd love to hear your stories and your experiences with those spaces as well. I'm Tafony. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Goodbye.